I hope nobody's on fire. We're gonna wait for them to go by.
Sure.
I didn't actually get any. I was mining drinking, but I had an actual. There we go. So we're back.
Cheers.
We have fresh drinks. Talked a little bit about what we've already discussed and sort of where we were going with that. And you raised a really important question. Like we discussed a lot about what you've learned, but we didn't really talk about how you learned it, like how you developed your expertise, how you developed methodology. So let's talk about that a little bit because I'm specifically talking about growing in my understanding of terminology and technologies and how to communicate about what it is we do and the services we provide and the technologies we use in doing it. So how do, essentially, because this is what we both are, how do salespeople learn the cloud? How do we learn Azure? How do we learn cloud computing?
So I think there's two different things, right? There's one, learning sales tactics around selling the cloud, and there's two, how do you go about learning what the cloud is and keep updated and all that stuff. And a lot of these different things that we're talking about kind of relay back to the same DevOps culture, right? Where you're constantly interacting with different groups and learning about different functions that's not necessarily your role, and so you're not siloing yourself into a specific category, and being able to interact with all of your kind of coworkers is really crucial. So I would say as a salesperson interested in learning cloud, the number one thing I'd say is you better care about your clients and not the products that you're selling, because having that solution sale mind or methodology is way more important than checking any box off of your scorecard, right? And so in order to really validate yourself as a salesperson in cloud, there's kind of two tactics to take, right? One is actually do know what you're talking about and have an understanding from a very basic level of what kind of functions and things happen with this specific product or whatever. Or don't, and call out that you don't. It's okay. Azure's very complex and you're the sales guy. You don't have to have every answer to every question, and you don't have to fill every second of free space with talk time. And so one of the big things that I see salespeople getting wrong is getting nervous in speaking or over committing themselves to a specific product's capabilities, or offering up incentives when they don't know what else to do, right? So making sure that you kind of know where you stand is really, really important. And then making sure that you continually reiterate to your customers, hey, I'm here for you. I'm here to make this process really easy, so help me understand where you guys are so that we can best relay this over to the different engineering teams or the different development teams or whatnot. So.
Okay. It's interesting because this wasn't planned at all, but like I just scrolled a little bit through our Twitter feed,
Sure.
Because that served us well last time. And someone actually just posted, and I will again put a graphic of the tweet up. Some just want to know enough to do their jobs. Others want to know the entire picture. So I would imagine, as with any position, there are people selling cloud services or selling the cloud, capital T, capital C, that research just enough to be able to convince somebody to get on board, but don't actually understand the underlying technology, culture, infrastructure. How does somebody go from one to the other?
Yeah.
Like, did you start as just knowing enough to do your job, and have you evolved into knowing the bigger picture, or did you make it a goal to know the bigger picture from the beginning.
So
acknowledging the fact that sales is a substantial amount of bullshit, no matter what you're selling, no matter who you are, no matter what you're selling, you're convincing somebody to buy something.
Fact. So I would preface that with, I knew nothing about cloud when I first joined, nor did I try and think that I knew. I knew that there was something called a virtualized machine, and that's it, right?
Okay.
So I think it's more the personality of having to balance kind of knowing nothing and knowing the full picture, which is really, really important. And I think folks with that kind of entrepreneurial spirit of wanting to see a business succeed is a really important piece of that. There's something called analysis paralysis, and people that want to know the big picture, they'll say, wait, I need to know all the functions, and then I want to know how the functions function, and I want to know how all these functions function. And so getting into that analysis paralysis really, really hurts an overall business, right? So if we're selling cloud services, right, I'm going to go to the engineer and say, how does this work? And he says, here's a 2 sentences thing on it. This is how it works. Now I have a general picture. Well, how does this work? And how does this work? And how does this work? And quickly, you can get into a scenario where you're pulling a lot of your team's time in just trying to learn. And although it is very important and helps you get a better perspective of what that is, understanding the key elements of what's important to know and what things your customers will ask you about and what things you should have a general understanding around is super, super important. So if someone starts saying to me, well, how do I ensure I'm striping my discs properly? There's no way I'm gonna try and answer that question. I'm gonna say,
I don't know what that means.
Exactly. So I'm not the right guy to answer that question, but I can find you the guy who does. So being super, super honest and upfront with your customers about that is absolutely critical to a successful solution sell.
So that's great, because Mark followed that same tweet up immediately. I imagine it was just too many characters to express his total thought. Conveying the right info in the right amounts to the right audience is hard. And you sort of touched on that a little bit about making sure you're talking about something you're knowledgeable about to somebody who's asking questions that you're knowledgeable about.
Yeah.
So do you just serve to facilitate the conversation between the more technical sides of our company, or do you get the information and then come back? Do you just introduce somebody from a technical side to the client? Do you learn about it and then bring it back to them yourself?
So we touched on this on our last talk, and I think the orchestration of all of those pieces is really where the value sets in.
Okay.
Of a salesperson in this kind of big picture that we're painting. Knowing the incentives of the people that you're talking to and why they're asking those specific questions is way more important than understanding how to best respond to those questions most of the time, right? So if someone just starts to ask about this specific thing without context, you could respond and then give them the answer that would be absolutely correct, but wouldn't actually serve value to you trying to sell them cloud computing, right? So understand the incentives, orchestrating how your engineering support and your development support teams in a sales capacity, orchestrating how they interact with those customers and how they present the information is super, super important. And it's really key to follow that kind of DevOps mentality from both the engineering side, the development side, the DevOps side, the sales side, the marketing side, and the executive side, so that all of these things kind of fire on all pistons all at once, so you get that best result.
Okay.
Versus just sitting there in a reactive model that says, yes, I'll address this question, yes, I'll address that question. You want to make sure that you paint the picture and paint the vision, which also talks to kind of client education sometimes, right? So when customers ask this question, it probably means they don't necessarily fully understand this piece. So we need to help paint that picture sometimes.
And this is great. And you know what, I really think I need to offer a really sincere thank you to Mark, because I'm just like scraping his Twitter feed, because he's talking about part of why community. It's like he's tweeting. Like, this is not live streamed. We're not talking to him. Nobody knows we're recording this outside this office. But this is perfect, because he's saying, right, part of why communication is hard is because different people want different levels of information, of info. So I'm going to reach out to Mark, and I'm going to send him like a t-shirt or something because thank you. This has been really compelling information, and I like that we're able to talk about it.
Yeah, so it's actually a lot more similar than most people would think. I think it really comes down to, like I've highlighted a couple times, the incentives of that person dictate how you should interact with them. And I think the big difference between a small business, small organization, and a large one, Fortune 100, Fortune 500, is the amount of stakeholders that need to be present in the decision, right? Making an objective decision is super easy in a vacuum. Mm-hmm. A versus B versus C.
Sure.
But when you add in all those complexities, it becomes much more of a kind of abstract picture of how you should actually make decisions.
I really thank you for your time and sitting down and doing this with me again. I know, I really had to twist your arm to get you to sit down and talk a little bit more about yourself and drink a Manhattan. But yeah, thanks so much. So moral of the story, to find out more about Azure, about implementation, about scale, about what's on fire outside, because I'm going to try to find out, call Charles. Not me, call Charles, because he actually knows a bit more about what he's talking about, a lot more about what he's talking about. So thanks, I really appreciate it. This has been illuminating.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much,
Thanks for having me.
And cheers.
Cheers. Thank you for having me.